Hey, brother.
Uh-oh. Let me mute
Yep.
my phone. Hey, what's up, Charles? Hang on. Do me a favor. Keep them company while I go get my phone. Oh, it's right
Oh,
here.
hello, everyone.
It's
Welcome
right here. It's right
to
here.
this
It's right here.
exciting evening we have. And yes, share, 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 share.
Excuse me. Whoo. Oh, that was a good sneeze, bro. Oh, that was a good sneeze. You know that kind of sneeze that just make you feel so good? That's what that was, man.
Uh,
I sneezed so hard my camera got crooked. There we go. What's up, everybody? Aloha Wednesday. Happy hump day. I'm excited for tonight, man. I'm excited for you guys. If you haven't already, share. Charlie, how am I saying, Charlie?
yeah, hey, right on. All you colorblind people get more confused with no sign. Me, I'm just straight up. There you go. Share, 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 share.
Well,
So,
all right, guys. We are stoked. We are excited. We got the angry doctor on tonight. Um, what a sneeze when you sneeze and fart. Yeah, that double the pleasure, double the fun. But that did not happen tonight. Anyway, the angry doctor, guys. I know we have a lot of viewers that have not seen the angry doctor. I'm gonna do it one more time. I want you guys to share the heck out of this thing. Share the heck out of this thing. Because and I was just telling Charlie, I don't know what this guy is gonna say. Um, he's in Miami right now. It's 1 a.m. I if you haven't seen him on our show, you probably saw him on CNN and MSNBC and many other national news networks. He's a sought after speaker. We became friends last year with him. And although we have never personally met, he is going to come for Charlie's concert. But this guy is fun. He's exciting. He's straight. But I don't know what he's going to say. And we just was telling Charlie, what if he comes on and he says, hey, you know, open him up. It's all safe. And I don't know, but it's going to, he's an expert. He's a scientist. He's an emergency physician, but he's also a scientist. And he does work with Penn State University and all over the country. Again, he's sought after for his expertise. And we are blessed and honored to have him on our show tonight. So I have been excited. He reached out to us last week just to say hello and check how we were doing. And I told him, man, you ever got an opening in your schedule, come jump on our show. So tonight's the night. And again, remember, it's 1 a.m. in the morning. He and maybe Charlie can explain why do they call him the angry doctor. That's what he has on
well,
his
they call,
Instagram. His Instagram, that's his thing. He's the angry doctor.
well, they call him the angry doctor because he tells it like it is. Not as brash as Dr. Wong, but pretty darn close. But he knows when to turn on the heat and when not to turn on the heat. And he was one of those that challenged those doctors who were promoting the hydroxychloroquine. And one of the doctors felt that, she believed in the devil's sperm. And so that's how he gained notoriety when he called her on national TV a wackadoodle. Yep.
Wackadoodle.
Yep.
Wackadoodle. Yeah, this
Called
guy's
her a wackadoodle.
again. It's been a while since we've had him on the show. A lot has changed, but he's been in areas. He's from Arizona, guys. He's from Arizona, where he actually still practices in Arizona. And
Oh, brother, I forgot to mention to you the captions. You
oh,
you took that
hang
off,
on.
or yeah.
Go ahead, keep on
So the
company while I do this thing.
yeah, the reason why we wanted to take the captions off was to make sure because we have no control of the placement on the screen where he's at, and we did not want captioning to go over his face throughout the entire time that we'll be discussing with him. But hopefully, and again, his time is so important, and we are so blessed to have him on for all of you. But we will get right into the thick of things when he comes on, because his time is so precious, especially 1 a.m. in the morning in Miami. And I didn't even know he was down in Miami. I thought he was up on the East Coast. He's also a professor, I believe an adjunct professor in medicine. So he originally from his home base, I believe, is in Arizona. And so, how you doing there, Mel? Is it working? Not working?
It doesn't look like it is
Okay,
working.
it's off.
Wait,
No,
it did?
oh no, no, it went off a little while, and now it's back on. But
Yeah,
let's see, because it's delayed on my end. It's delayed,
yeah. I
and
honestly do not know how to get rid of that. I thought I did, but
okay, yeah. So if it's where we'll put him on, we shall put him on what you call it, speaker view. So I
yeah,
do not,
we'll do.
and anyway, yeah, it's not working. But main thing, we got everybody up. We want to say aloha to all of you, our regulars, and some of new names popping up. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Uh, I did want to ask him, because he's down in Miami, and that's a tourist destination, what he felt about us opening the way we did, and what can we expect. Because I think he has a pretty good insight, given the footprint of Hawaii, with Florida being much larger. But he could kind of give us um, a run through what to expect. So I think that would be good. Okay.
Yeah,
Dane, we don't know what's happening. I can only catch the show on my iPad, not working. I mean iPhone. iPad is not working. Ooh, okay. Um, sorry about that. I don't know if
yeah.
anybody else is experiencing problems with trying to get on. We kind
Yeah,
of
you can get them on
I
your
tell
iPhone.
you to
Yeah, something must be
yeah.
wrong with your iPad because if you're getting it on iPhone, it means the signal is going out. I'm not
Mhm.
sure.
Right.
Is the captioning bothering you folks? I cannot. I see it on my phone, and I cannot. I think I got to go into the main settings on the website. But then if we did that, I'd have to restart the session. So I'll work on that for the next one. If it blocks his face or anybody's face, then I'll go ahead and switch to speaker mode, and that will we'll do it that way. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Never used to have this. Never happened before. I don't know why all of a sudden the uh, the captioning popped on. I mean, it's good for our hearing impaired viewers, but I want
Yeah.
to make sure that we're not blocking our guest's face. I don't. Marie says she's not seeing any captions. I don't see any. Okay. Do anybody see? I didn't do anything. The button that I pushed, there are no captions. Okay, no one has captions. I don't even see captions on my phone. Okay, I see the captions on mine. So anyway, all right.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, looks like the captions are off. I'm not sure. I didn't touch anything. So I think they're just afraid of Charlie. Look, no one is seeing it.
Oh boy.
So the state decides, Charlie, to start counting probable cases. Oh, there he is.
Yes.
There he is. You
Okay.
guys ready, people? Are you ready?
Yes, we are. There he is. He's loading up his audio at this time. Okay, one more time. Oh, he's okay. He's
He's there. I see him.
Yeah, but I can't hear his audio. Let's see what happened.
There
There
we
he
go.
goes.
Oh,
There.
right. Aloha, guys. How you doing?
What's up?
How have y'all
How,
been?
how you doing, Doc?
I'm okay. I'm excited to be on with you guys again.
Not as
Oh,
excited as we are.
Oh, come on.
yeah, no. You got a lot of people popping in, and they always ask. He says, "Hey, when's Murtaza coming back on?" I says, "Well, he's very busy," and I apologize. I didn't know you was. I thought you was up in the East Coast, but I mean you're in the East Coast, but up north towards. But now you're down in Miami.
Yeah, I'm in
Miami.
at least tonight I am. But yeah, actually lately, last couple of months, I've been in Miami more than in Pennsylvania or Phoenix. And so, but tomorrow I won't be. Tomorrow I'll be west again in Colorado. So like, it seems to change quite a bit. But usually, I guess usually of the last couple of months, it's been Miami. So not the same as Hawaii, but similar in that we get lots of visitors, for better or for worse, right?
Right.
Well, Doc, I think our captioning is going right across your face. So we're gonna jump to speaker mode real soon, so
Okay.
so people get to see you and you speak. It's been a while since you've been on our show. A lot I mean, it's like a whole different environment now, a
I
whole
know.
different thing. So, and we just kind of want to pick your brain and find out, first of all, how you doing? How's everything going in your life? What are you seeing? And now that you're in Miami, a tourist destination, much like Hawaii, what's going on in the world of COVID as far as what you can see? And recently, CDC came out with some easing of the restrictions that, like I told Charlie, I don't know what this guy is going to say when he comes on tonight. I don't know, but we did preface your introduction by you being an emergency doctor as well as a scientist. So we are very anxious to hear. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Doc, and give us an overview, man. And remember, nothing is censored. Not that I have to tell you, because you already know.
I appreciate it. I was actually looking forward to being able to drop some F-bombs. It's been a while since I've been able to do that. And so, because sometimes there are things to think about where I really do get riled up, but you can't really say that on TV, but I can with you guys. And so I appreciate you letting me be honest and upfront. So it is kind of a different world in the sense of what the CDC is saying. It's not like COVID has completely gone away, right? And if you're, say, somebody living in India, it's one of the worst times of the pandemic. So when I say it's a different world, and when you say it's a different world, I think we're all mean in terms of being in the United States, and in particular, being vaccinated, and what the CDC says you can or cannot do if you've been vaccinated. So as a lot of people have heard, some people were a little bit surprised. A couple weeks ago, when the CDC said you don't need to wear masks outdoors, I'll be honest, I didn't know the CDC was saying you needed to wear masks outdoors because the risk of transmission is so low, especially for outside and away from people, that when they said they announced that, I was like, oops, I didn't realize that was even in place. So at that time when they announced that, I was like, yeah, you guys probably waited a bit long to let people know you don't need masks outside. Of course, it's different if you're packed right next to each other outside. And when I mean outside, I'm putting in quotes, I mean, outdoor restaurant that's really a tent that's zipped up. That's not outside, okay? But if you're going for a walk in a park or along the shores of the beach in Kauai, you never needed a mask if the data were right? So it's almost surprising that it took the CDC that long to say that, so much so that I didn't even know they had masks in place. To go from that to a couple of weeks later say, you know what, you don't need them outdoors or indoors anymore. We're back to pre-pandemic levels as long as you're not in healthcare, which I am, or on public transportation or immunocompromised, et cetera. Then even indoors, if you're vaccinated, you don't need a mask. I think people took that as surprising as how in a matter of a couple of weeks did you go from don't need it outside to you don't even need it indoors. But that's the CDC guideline if you're vaccinated, and that's a big if. So, and I say that because we know there's a lot of people in Hawaii who aren't being vaccinated. And that's true in a lot of states. But there are news stories coming out about people who are refusing to get vaccinated in your beautiful island. And so, that's a choice. Nobody's forcing it. But if you're not vaccinated, the guidelines are that you cannot be mingling. And so anyway, this opens up a whole, slew of things we can talk about, whether it was too soon or not for the CDC to say what it did, whether people should listen or not listen, whether people who are vaccinated really should, kind of open up, whether people who aren't vaccinated can let loose a little bit or not. There are all sorts of paths we can take, and I'll let you, the hosts, decide which way we want to go with this. Uh-oh.
Charlie's muted.
Muted? Am I muted? Oh, there he is. Okay. I wanted to ask you, being in Florida, and so, you understand the footprint of Florida, and with Governor DeSantis, how he was basically acting from day one, just trying to speed things up. I guess the question is, with Hawaii being a much smaller footprint and a lot of people coming into Hawaii now, I get the gist of being vaccinated and on the outside. I have no qualms about that. But it's when they make when the message gets confusing is on the indoors. And if you're not vaccinated, no one really knows who's vaccinated and who's not. So then we start running this risk of this intermingling without any checks or balance. The next thing you know, we have sniffles starting. Then we have children getting positive cases like we had a couple of weeks ago here on Kauai. And so those are the kind of things that I worry about that, I wish my preference is I wish they would have held off until we had a greater numbers vaccinated that we can say for sure, yes. But because we know now that many don't want to take it, so I guess the question is, is herd immunity reachable? And if it's not, is the CDC using, because they went to 12 and over now, right? Can get vaccinated, 12 and over. Are they using those numbers as well to lump onto the numbers to reach those numbers to say, yeah, we're at herd immunity? What's your opinion about that?
So you're asking all the right questions, Charlie. And I think these are some of the things we've been wondering as well. And I think, honestly, these are some of the things the CDC experts were asking each other amongst each other. What they were probably looking at was vaccination rates, which were going up quite well for, as poorly as some states did in terms of controlling the pandemic. A lot of states did quite well in vaccinating people. And so some people find it ironic that all you really needed to do was distance and wear masks like so many other countries did. It was a fairly cheap and effective method of reducing the disease, but we said, nah, screw it. We're going to take the NASA approach, just like we were the first people on the moon. We want to be the first ones to have this novel vaccine spread out as quickly as possible. And so we took the more expensive route, expensive in terms of cost with the vaccine, but also in terms of how many lives were lost in the meantime, right? But when we got to that, when we got to basically this newfound mRNA vaccine and being able to produce it and spread it, we did a pretty good job. I got to admit, this was pretty good on a lot of states' parts to get the vaccine out and available to people this rapidly. Other countries are jealous. Like there are countries who are developed countries, forget like developing countries, even developed countries who are jealous of how easy it is for an American to get a vaccine. They're really taken aback by the stories of surpluses that states are giving back vaccines, being like, we don't know what to do with these. Nobody wants them anymore. Because they'll die to have, not literally, but they really would want the vaccine and that ease in their own countries. And so that part was done really well. I think the CDC, I wasn't there, but I imagine they asked similar things to what you did, which is, when will we reach herd immunity? Will we reach herd immunity? Is this close enough? And I was a bit pessimistic. I mean, that vaccine was very, very, very effective. Like when it came out and the data that have come since, which have corroborated the effectiveness, like extremely effective, whichever vaccine you get. When it comes to severe disease or hospitalization, listen, I haven't yet hospitalized a patient for COVID who was vaccinated since being vaccinated. And so for the last couple of months, when I admit somebody, because I still get COVID people and some of them are sick enough to be admitted, none of them have been truly vaccinated. Some people may have had one shot or not the second yet, but I've yet to have somebody who says I was fully vaccinated be hospitalized. It does happen. We know it happens, but it's so rare that you might as well play the Powerball, because the odds are very rare if you're fully vaccinated to be severe enough to be hospitalized. extremely effective vaccine. The problem is it's not just vaccines that matter, but vaccination that matters. And so you can have 100% efficacy vaccine, but if 0 people take it, you're going to have no effect, right? That's nothing groundbreaking. You guys know that. But I think the CDC was looking at how many people getting vaccinated and the numbers going up, and eventually became to this level, presumably, where they were like, now we're at that standstill, sort of a standstill. People are still being vaccinated, but that level of oomph we were hoping for is not quite there, which some of us, I'm sure you guys, I'm sure you, Mel, and you, Charlie, kind of suspected this might happen, where we're going to get to a point where people are going to say, I don't want to get vaccinated. And then so you've got a lot of people who are vaccinated, but a lot of people who aren't. And the question becomes, as great as it would be to say, now it's over. Now the pandemic is over, we have herd immunity. It was probably not going to happen based on the fact that we knew a lot of people were going to say, I don't want to get the vaccine. And so then they were looking at, can we take the number of people who've been vaccinated and the number of people who've been infected, and granted there's overlap, but if you add those, maybe there's enough immunity there. And imagine at some level they realize we're just not going to reach that. And they are expanding, like you said, there are people who are not adults, who are children getting vaccinated now, and that ought to boost the numbers. But at some point they probably decided, and I don't know, I wasn't there, they probably decided that if there's a goal we were going to reach, we're not going to get any closer at this point. We are about as best as we can. And they also looked, by the way, at the data of vaccinated people. They wanted time to look at people who've been vaccinated to see how much were they getting sick and also how much were they spreading. And when they realized that the spread, not just the sickness level, but also the spread from people who are vaccinated is very low, they decided, listen, if you're vaccinated, you can hang out. You can even take off masks if you're indoors with people, if everybody's vaccinated, because they realized that the spread is low, the rate of disease in that population is low, but it is not herd immunity. We are not at herd immunity. There are still people getting COVID, which by definition almost means we're not at herd immunity. And so if you are not vaccinated, just because other people can take off their masks doesn't mean you can. And even for people who are vaccinated, if they're in crowded gatherings like public transportation, and for somebody like me who's in healthcare, we still need to mask up. So I know it can seem a little bit confusing, and there are a lot of people who are concerned, but I think what ended up happening was the combination of how good these data really are for people who are vaccinated with the fact that our goal wasn't necessarily to bring the disease burden down to 0, but really to significantly reduce hospitalizations. When we reached those levels, the CDC presumably decided, it's okay to go back to at least somewhat levels of normal. As you guys have mentioned, the science is part of that, but then the other part is the messaging and how people interpret it. Because as you guys know, the people least likely to be vaccinated were also the least likely to wear masks. And so the people who want to travel and didn't want to wear masks on the planes before are still going to get on the planes now, and even more so. And nobody's going out there checking antibody levels, right? If you tell them you've been vaccinated, by and large, they're taking that at face value. And a lot of those people are going to end up in Hawaii, have ended up in Hawaii. And the question is, how vigilant are they going to be, and how much they're going to spread it to people who are on the islands and not vaccinated, including kids. Because we know kids usually don't get severe disease, but they very much can get infected. And listen, if I had a kid, I wouldn't go around saying, well, he's 8, so he'll probably be fine. Yeah, he'll probably be fine and that he won't die, but I want to risk his having long-term complications. And if I were a Hawaiian and I knew a bunch of people were coming to my island just saying they're vaccinated and knowing that a lot of them probably aren't, I would be nervous. But at the same time, that doesn't mean the CDC can say, well, because we're nervous about people lying, we're not going to let anybody do anything. So presumably they were in a tough spot, and that's why they made the call they made.
Well, in Hawaii, I think the last number I saw was 40 or somewhat, little over 40% fully vaccinated, our state. Every county is a little different, but in the statewide, 40+%. We originally heard the number of 70 to 75% fully vaccinated to reach herd immunity. That has changed because of the variants. So I think most people agree that, we may never get to that. I think it's what you were just trying to say. We may never get to that 90% or 95%. I think it's mathematically impossible when you take out the kids, all the little ones that, and those that cannot take vaccines. We just don't have the volume of people eligible or willing to take that vaccine to reach that herd immunity. Now, in Hawaii, we still have the safe travels program. I call this unsafe travels program because you take a test 3 days before you leave your wherever you're coming from. You get a negative result. You get to come here, no quarantine, no second test, none of that. They're talking about a vaccination passport where if you can prove that you're vaccinated, fully vaccinated plus 14 days, then you can come without a test, without any of that. My question is, because of the constant inflow of visitors coming in, whether they vaccinated or not, they can take a test instead of having a vaccine. Right now, the vaccine passport isn't going to happen because we cannot validate those cards. But with the influx of people coming in from areas that may be a little higher in variant infections, what does that do for our people that are even the vaccinated ones? But we still have a lot of people that haven't been vaccinated.
Yeah, you know, I was asked this question earlier today on an interview. And, you know, so variants are part of the disease process. That's true of any disease, and particular so with the coronavirus because of how transmissible it was variants were going to form. We knew it was going to happen if we didn't beat the disease. And honestly, they're going to continue to happen as long as the virus remains prevalent. What's been really reassuring is that at least the mRNA vaccines, I can't speak for example, AstraZeneca, which had some potentially concerning data in certain countries. But if you look at Israel and you look at the mRNA vaccines here, it looks like they are effective against the variants that are out there. Now, is it possible that a variant could come up that evades the vaccine? It is possible. In theory, the vaccine works in such a way, hopefully, that if there's a mutation that makes it evade the vaccine, that mutation ideally will also make it unable to infect humans. Now, do we know that for sure? No. Is it possible that if not everybody is vaccinated, more variants could spread? Yes, it's possible. But then it becomes a game of basically numbers, which is how often is that going to happen? How likely is it to happen? And of course, if unvaccinated people are coming to the islands, and especially if they're mingling with people, it makes the chances quite a bit higher. But if you're this almost becomes like a, people have said this has become like Darwinism at its best, and they're kind of joking, but it's, maybe they're being kind of serious, where the people who have been vaccinated are going to be the most likely to be able to beat any of the variants as of now, and that people who aren't vaccinated are going to be the most likely to be getting sick from one of the variants and spreading them. And so you basically got a dichotomy in our population. The unfortunate situation is in those people who haven't been able to get vaccinated and want to be, though again, in the States, that's become fairly rare. And also with children, and in whom we still have fairly limited data, especially for the really young ones. And also, knowing whether or not there are long-term side effects. And so, yes, you're right. If we don't stamp out the disease, the way we almost did with polio or almost did with measles, obviously the cases still come up, that gives an opportunity to continue to evolve. That's what viruses do. They mutate, and it gives it an opportunity to continue to have variants. But the hope is that the way these variants form either makes it impossible to infect a human, or if still possible to infect a human, hopefully unable to evade the vaccine. But could it happen that happens? It's possible. That's why we've been saying from the get-go, we want to beat this as quickly and effectively as possible, not prolong it. There were some people who had this logic of, listen, we're all either going to get sick now or we're going to get sick later, so might as well all get sick now and get it over with. Clearly, I disagreed with that. The sort of Barrington Declaration or whatever. Herd immunity was not supposed to be reached by getting infected. Herd immunity was supposed to be reached by vaccination. We got the vaccine. We didn't quite get the vaccination to the levels we needed. And so we're not going to reach herd immunity anytime soon, maybe not at all. But that might be okay if eventually the virus peters out. And that's why it's just basically a race of vaccinating people versus letting the virus evolve.
Now, Doc, what type of medical condition would someone have to have for their doctor to give them a clear and concise recommendation that they not get vaccinated, what kind of condition would a person have to have?
So I remember when these vaccines were coming out, a lot of people were nervous and they're talking about anaphylactic reactions and allergies. The mRNA vaccines, I mean, you basically have to be allergic to fluid to be allergic to the vaccine. I mean, I don't want to sound too facetious, but the stuff that's in there is already in your body. And so, for example, a lot of these, whether I'm working in, the healthcare setting, like in person or on telehealth, where a lot of people call in and ask for exceptions for masks or for vaccines, we're being told to not give it to them. There's very few reasons to say you shouldn't be getting a vaccine. Very few. Now with for example, Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which is an adenovirus vaccine, you have to consider, well, is somebody have a certain level of immunity that attenuated vaccine itself could cause issues? Could the person have an anaphylactic reaction to what's in that material? Has this person had potentially, you guys may remember, it was very rare, but it became an issue with these sort of females in childbearing age who were getting clots, potentially with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. That's something to consider. Is somebody already predisposed to clots or to thrombocytopenia and bleeding? And then should we maybe be careful about, again, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine for that person? But these are very rare cases, and even rarer for the mRNA one. There's these sort of conspiracy theorists who talk about people fainting and dying after getting the vaccine. Completely ridiculous, completely preposterous. As of now, we know of 0 people who have died precisely because of the mRNA vaccines. Have people died after getting them? Yeah. I mean, listen, if you get shot by a bullet, the COVID vaccine doesn't prevent you from being killed from being shot by a bullet. You can talk about gun control laws if you're afraid about being shot by a bullet, but it's not the vaccine that did it. So as of now, there are very few exceptions. And I would say for the mRNA, basically, I would basically say none, in my opinion, that will allow you to say you should not get it in terms of a health clause. Now, if people themselves don't want to get it, again, we can't force them, but clearly there's very effective data, very good data on how effective vaccines can be for people and for spread and for how safe it is.
Okay, thank you.
So, Doc, you pretty much travel. You're in Miami right now, and again, let's remind people it's almost 1:30 in the morning there. We appreciate your time. Pennsylvania, Arizona, you'll be in Colorado tomorrow. What are you seeing across the country as far as states that have completely opened up? Are you seeing increased caseloads, increased hospitalizations? And I mean, of course, vaccination percentages come into play, but what are you seeing in these different locations?
Yeah, there's some people who love commenting on experts' threads, and sometimes on mine being like, you just want the pandemic to continue so you can, be in the limelight. And let me say one thing. I get $0 an hour for any of my appearances, right? I think actually the most compensation I've gotten in my whole career of being on the media is that wonderful coffee you sent, which my wife loved, by the way. She loved it. And we didn't open it until Florida, honestly, because we were in the process of moving. So we got here, and she is super grateful. It's some of the best coffee she has had. I don't drink coffee, but she does.
You got some more coming. So
oh no! Please, I feel guilty. No need for that. But I want, I want to say, for one, thank you. That was very kind of you guys. 2, that's the only thing I've got, right? And that wasn't compensation. That was a thank you. That wasn't compensation. So I want everybody to know. I think your viewers know this. I don't get paid for any of this. So I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not trying to promote some Bill Gates agenda. There's no benefit to me, especially somebody who used to like to travel, for the pandemic to continue, right? I don't get paid for this. But so on the flip side, I want to say there really has been, I think, some good news. And so as much as people might want to say I'm like a fear striker or whatever, hospital, at least when I'm working, the number of COVID visits and definitely the number of hospitalizations is far lower. The vast majority of what I see now isn't COVID related. Now, volumes are still down. People aren't coming to the ER as much as they used to because there's still this level of, I want to avoid it if I can, which I understand. But the people who do come in sick, I do get the sick COVID ones, but they're a lot rarer than they were before. And in terms of the rest of the community, one of the things that I was kind of shocked about, and I want to say that Florida seems to be a weird anomaly in a lot of ways. People question whether the data are accurate. People question whether everybody got sick too many times early. When I got here originally, I was like, oh my God, this is one of the worst places I've seen in terms of masking. People are disasters here. And indeed, there were a lot of people who were indoors not masking, including the healthcare setting. It was quite shocking. What's been interesting is that since the CDC guideline came out, I have basically noticed no difference. So if you go grocery shopping, I expected everybody to be like, screw this, especially down here in South Florida, where they were itching for that, or so I felt like. Everybody say, screw it, very few masks to happen after the CDC set their guidelines. But what I've noticed seems to have borne out in the news stories you guys have seen, where people are still masking. Vaccinated people are still masking. There are, of course, still people who aren't masking. Again, a lot of them were already not masking before. But a lot of the people who were masking before still are, even after they've had their shots. So what's been really fascinating to me, and I think surprising, is maybe we have had that cultural change. You've seen people on Twitter and Facebook say, I haven't gotten a cold all year. Nobody I know has gotten the flu. Everybody has realized that the distancing and masking that we were doing for COVID also protected them from the stuff they used to get all the other years, which, by the way, sucked, right? You might not die from a cold, but all three of us here are men, not to be too binary, but I think we're all men. The man cold is a real thing. So females can make fun of us for it all they want, but it sucks. When I get a cold, I'm down and out for the count. So I'm really stoked when I don't get one. And I think a lot of people have noticed that. And so on one end, they're saying, that was pretty sweet. I'd be willing to mask up again during flu season. But two, there's this level of, do I want to be the guy or gal who's the first one to take off his or her mask at the grocery store when so many other people are masking? So much so that I'll be honest with you guys, I wouldn't normally admit this maybe, but to you guys and to your viewers, I was outdoors yesterday. We went to it was kind of like an outdoor fair. And I was like, sweet, we're outside. I'm just walking around, with my mask hanging around my neck. And everybody walking out of their cars was wearing a mask. So I was like, well, I guess if they're doing it, I should too. This is coming from the guy who, by the way, was very anal about mask wearing, from the guy who wore masks before the pandemic even started. Like anytime I got on a plane, I'd wear a mask. And so for me to see people even outside still wearing them, which again, there's probably no need to, but there's no harm. And there has been sort of a cultural shift, I think, where people are okay wearing them. Yes, some of that is hesitancy. People are afraid. They don't want to quickly be like, wait, let me just take it off. I've been wearing it for a year. Feels weird to take it off right now. Some of them will eventually. But it has been interesting to see that for all my pessimism about my co-citizens and how poorly we were doing about beating the pandemic, once this really effective vaccine came out, people are still saying, you know what, this mask isn't so bad. And they're right. It's not so bad. It's a piece of cloth or a piece of fabric that you wear on your face to protect other people. There's so many other things we do for each other in this country that, again, maybe people take for granted, but my having immigrant parents realize is really amazing about our country. There's so many things we do for each other that other people don't, that wearing a mask really is very simple. So after all the negative stuff I've said over the last year or so, and I think rightfully so, this thing I think really is positive. Our cases have gone down. They're not even close to herd immunity, but they have gone down. Hospitalizations have significantly gone down. And interestingly, people are still masking even if they're vaccinated. So I think that's pretty cool, honestly. So a piece of good news, I want to say.
Now, let me ask you about our friends over in Asia, especially Japan. We see that, there's another state of emergency with outbreaks. Now, their culture, and this is kind of ironic because, and Mel knows this, being former cops. Back in the day when we do a lot of extraditions, we would see Japanese tourists masking. And that was back, way back, before the 80s anyway. And it kind of struck us like, why are they wearing the mask? And yet, we felt that they were onto something now if we look back at it. Like they knew what they were doing. But with this new resurgence that's now happening in Japan, what do you attribute that to? Because they mask up all the time. But it's just, is it from not enough vaccination or
Yes.
What can it be?
So great question. I want to focus on one of the things that I think is being kind of glossed over by a lot of people, especially on my side of the COVID spectrum or political spectrum, whatever you want to say, which is this is actually one of the things that has riled me up and does rile me up. And I'll try to be careful when I say it. But as you mentioned, that something you and Mel noticed years ago about the Japanese masking, East Asians masking, I want to focus on that a little bit, not just because of our cultural difference, but in particular because, as you guys know, there's a lot of people on the right-wing side, or in particular the conspiracy theories side, who will say something like, Fauci screwed up, he said not to wear masks, and now he's saying it, and clearly he doesn't know what he's talking about, so why should we believe anything we said? Which is a preposterous logic, right? People can get things wrong, and a lot of people have said the science changes. But honestly, even that is a little bit of a cop-out, no pun intended, because we knew, like, Japanese people weren't dumb, South Koreans weren't dumb, people in Hong Kong weren't dumb, they'd been through pandemics. You can say we didn't quite have the data yet, you can say that, but I think that's aggressive because everybody in East Asia knew the masks did something. They weren't just doing it for psychological reasons, they lived through pandemics. So you can defend, the CDC or NIH or whatever all you want and say they didn't have the science yet. I would question it, because if to you science is only science that's made by white people, okay. But clearly there were people who had some data, or at least thought they had data, whether you agree with it or not, that there was some benefit from masking in a pandemic. And that's just logical, right? Like, of course, that's why we cover our mouths when we cough. It doesn't do much if you have just a fist up, but that courtesy didn't come out of nowhere. You can say I don't have evidence for it, but clearly it came from somewhere, just like clearly masking in East Asia came from somewhere. The other thing that's really frustrating, and again, this wasn't really the question you asked, but I want to say this because I'm never going to get to say this anywhere else, but on your platform I can, is one of the reasons Dr. Fauci said it himself, that he was saying, guys, don't go out and buy masks, was because hospitals were in short supply and healthcare workers were in short supply, and we didn't have the evidence for it yet that it necessarily helped. So, let the healthcare workers get it. Okay, it seems logical. I think it's bullshit. Not in terms of Dr. Fauci. He's like brilliant, mad respect for him. He was brilliant since well before the pandemic, but it is not on the American people who want to go to CVS and buy a mask to look out for hospital supply. If the hospital CEO hasn't bought enough masks, it's his fucking fault. So if you, as an American citizen, want to go buy a mask, I don't want the NIH or the CDC or an expert saying, don't go do it. Your poor hospital administration didn't plan well enough to have masks. That's crap, okay? It's not the onus on American citizens to look out for hospital administrators. They can just not buy another yacht. And I know it's not quite that simple. I know it's not quite as simple as if you have money, just get the masks. But they fucked up. Not the people who decided I'm going to be extra safe and buy a mask for myself. So that part was utterly wrong. Again, as you said, you guys have noticed for decades that certain cultures wore masks. So you can talk about the data aren't there. I question it, but fine. Even if I give you that, to tell people don't wear masks, we need them for others, is so preposterous. And so I think that was the most harmful thing there, because imagine there were probably people who were like, listen, I trust the NIH, I trust the CDC, I trust the experts, I thought masks were good, but if they're saying don't wear them, maybe I won't. And now they're looking back, if they're still alive, which I hope they are, being like, well, that was a mistake. And it's very unfortunate to them because it shouldn't have been on them to begin with. Data or no data, it's on the healthcare administrators, our government, our hospital chains, however you want to look at it, to have enough freaking masks for its healthcare professionals. Not you as an individual who just wants to buy one to protect yourself and your family. So anyway, I wanted to say that because I won't get to say that on any other show and everybody's gonna give me heat for it, but that was a fuck up. I think that part needs to be said. And I think now it has become clear that masks are effective. And again, that's not to say don't believe anything anybody tells you because the one time they're wrong, you should never believe them again. That's ludicrous. But at the same time, the reasons for why they were wrong aren't just based on the data. As for surges in East Asian countries, and it's not just Japan, by the way, right? I mean, obviously the countries right next to India are sort of seeing this issue. And that was sort of expected. Of course, it's going to go from India to Bangladesh. They're right next to each other. Of course, Nepal is potentially going to be affected. What's upsetting is these countries who have done a fairly good job, South Korea, Thailand, Vietnam. That's the virus, man. These things spread. So unless everybody's utterly contained, which clearly they're not, and you can't really do that, viruses do spread, including their variants. And so I don't know the specifics of what's going on in each and every country, but we do know that, again, in typical American fashion, somehow the bold ingenuity and science of the vaccines that we distributed here really do seem to be significantly more effective than some of the vaccines that other countries have. Moreover, a lot of the other countries don't have any vaccines at all or haven't done a good enough job of having those vaccines. But even countries like Seychelles, which vaccinated a lot of their population, saw quite a bit of a surge. So at one level, you can say, well, if we just vaccinate enough people, yes, that's true. Maybe we haven't vaccinated enough. But another, you have to say, man, these mRNA vaccines are completely novel, do seem to be really effective. And so, yeah, I mean, I think part of what happened in Japan isn't necessarily surprising. We know that, I guess it's called Minister Abe was a little bit more economy friendly than a public health expert would like. And so that may have played a little bit of a role. Maybe there were certain indoor gatherings happening when they shouldn't have been. Again, I want to be honest. You're never supposed to say on the real media, I'm not sure what happened because they don't like that. But if I'm being honest as a physician scientist, I can't say I know the very details and the very specifics of Japan. But I do know that the vaccinations we had here were very effective. And the other thing, by the way, is everything looks better when your numbers are horrible to begin with, right? So after our Christmas, our numbers are so horrible, they had nowhere to go but down, regardless of vaccination. So that also sort of synergized with our vaccination rates. Whereas other countries who had it very well controlled, like Singapore, a friend was joking with me recently who's living there right now, that we've got a surge, like 10 people got infected. And it's kind of funny and laughable, but really 10 people for them is a big deal because they were basically controlling the case almost completely. Whereas for us, there's 10 people probably on my street with it right now, right? So you have to look at it from both perspectives, not just the percentage of increases or decreases, but how many absolute numbers there were as well. Sorry about that tangent. I just wanted to really get that out there.
No, we wanted the people to understand why they call you the angry doctor, and they just it was funny because I watched the captions because I wanted to see what the caption would say when the F-bomb was dropped, and it was asterisk out. This thing is pretty smart. This caption.
Oh wow, that is smart.
I recognized that it was a bad word.
But how about that? We're gonna start doing this in Spanish now.
Yeah, well, this one, was pretty cool. So, like the Seychelles, you brought up the Seychelles, they didn't have Moderna and Pfizer. They had different types of vaccines. What was the major difference between their vaccines and our vaccines?
Yeah, I mean, these sort of live attenuated adenovirus vaccines, I mean, there's how they're different in the basics. Now, we talked earlier about whether there's differences in sort of side effects and reactions. And there seem to be, at least in terms of the material that they're made of, right? The mRNA is packaged basically in salt crystals and lipids, whereas the adenovirus has, well, for one, the virus itself, granted attenuated, but other material that it's packaged in. But beyond, side effects and reactions, there's also the effectiveness levels. And I think AstraZeneca, and by the way, this is true of AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, Sinovac, Musovac, whatever they call them. Basically, all these people who are using adenovirus vaccines, they just seem to be far less effective. They're basically taking a similar strategy to what the flu vaccine was. And again, they've had more effectiveness than the flu vaccine has had, but it's a similar idea, similar technology. Let's take some of the virus, attenuate it through another animal, for example, and then give a lower attenuated dose to people so that they build antibodies to it, but don't get sick from it. And so, in theory, that should work. Obviously, it has different levels of effectiveness for different diseases, like we've seen with the flu. We don't even have one at all for the common cold, partially because of how much it mutates and how many strains there are. But the mRNA vaccine really focuses on the spike protein itself. And so basically, you're telling the body, here's the protein that you should make antibodies to without giving it any certain level of virus. And so having that very specific thing, the equivalent I like to use, and I'm not a chef, this might be a bad example, is back in the day, if you want to sweeten something, maybe you squeeze a bunch of fruits or dates and you mix it in. And you're like, yeah, it tastes sweeter, I guess, but there's also this other like peachy, fruity skin. But then somebody figured out, oh, you know what makes a peach sweet? It's the sugar. And now you can just put sugar in your hot chocolate, and it's sweet without having like fruit rinds. And it's actually more sweet, right? You can mix in peaches and dates and stuff, and it'll make it sweeter. But if you mix in just what makes the fruit itself sweet, just the sugar, man, does that tea get sweet quickly. And so that's sort of the way I view the mRNA vaccine. I know some science experts out there are going to be like, wow, that sounded retarded. Is the R word allowed on your show? I'm not sure. Well, anyway, that sounded kind of dumb. But the way I view it, and, sort of simple analogy is the mRNA vaccine takes the most basic elemental part of what produces the antibody response, and therefore creates quite an antibody response, and effectively so, without as much of the side stuff involved. Whereas the other vaccines, the one that Seychelles have, and basically every other country has, outside the Western world, in particular the States, but outside the Western world, which is these live attenuated vaccines, they're basically taking a peach and mixing it in and hoping you have some level of sweetness, or in this case, giving some virus, mixing it in with your body and hoping you get an antibody response. And it just seems like it's not quite as effective, especially against whatever variants there are. And again, it's, healthcare should be there for everyone. Everybody has just as much a right to live healthily as everyone else. But clearly richer people have better access to better healthcare. We know that. Just like richer people have nicer cars and poorer people have to take public transportation, whatever the case may be. It's that way with healthcare as well. And we didn't necessarily know that would be the case going in. But I will say this, if for some reason the adenovirus vaccine had been more effective, you can bet your ass that we in the States would have had all the doses we needed. We would have bought them up. You know that. It turned out the mRNA vaccines were the most effective. And so we spread those and distributed those along with the adenovirus vector vaccine, which, we had a stockpile. There were a lot of people saying, why don't we give them to other countries? Why don't we give supplies to other countries? We basically had enough money to hedge and say, AstraZeneca, give us yours. Johnson & Johnson, give us yours. Moderna, we're going to take yours. Pfizer, we're going to take yours. And we're just going to start spreading them. Not everybody can do that. They're lucky to have the ones they do. And again, it's much better to be vaccinated than not, whatever the vaccine is. But we just got the best of them. And I think that's the difference.
So real quick follow-up. Had the Seychelles had the ability to use Moderna or Pfizer or J&J, definitely they would not be in that situation today, in your opinion.
I would be shocked if anybody said that if the mRNA vaccines were given, J&J is adenovirus, but Moderna or Pfizer, if the Seychelles had Moderna and Pfizer and had been the most vaccinated country in the world with those, I'm not saying there wouldn't have been a surge at all, but I think it would have been a lot less intense. And I'd be surprised if somebody said otherwise. I could be wrong, but I'd be surprised if somebody said otherwise.
Now, taking a look at the vaccination itself, we know that, and you've said it right at the get-go, that once you're vaccinated, you've seen people that are sick, but not really bad because they had the protection of that vaccine, but they needed a little help. Nobody died. Is it safe to say that even if we're vaccinated, subtly, we still can be carriers of that because, we have the COVID, whether we test positive or not, because I guess from the get-go, everyone was under the impression that if you get vaccinated, you reflect everything off of you. You just cannot get COVID, but that's not true. You can get COVID, but as subtle as it may be, can you still transmit it to someone who may not be protected? I guess that is the question, because I look at being vaccinated as being like an asymptomatic carrier. I wouldn't know if I had the virus on me or not, because I got the shield on me that protects me from the worst symptoms known to man. And I can just go by somebody, and if that person elects not to mask up, I don't know if that person is vaccinated or not. Can I transmit, just by say if I have a conversation and particulates leave my mouth and floats towards them, am I able to infect them?
So great question. It's more nuanced than, for example, should I wear a mask or not, right? This one is more complicated. are growing data showing that the level of even asymptomatic spread from vaccinated people is quite low. It's not zero, right? And that's sort of how I was trying to view it too. I think that was a good analogy you said, where it's kind of like a shield. I was like, man, wouldn't it be amazing? You get vaccinated and you can't even catch it. But how you define catching it is actually a very complex answer. And I think, you know, everybody becomes an expert on COVID tests and, you know, what it means, but like very few people truly understand what PCR is, right? There's a very good chance that all of us has a coronavirus particle on us, right? But the question is, do we have enough to be determined at the level of infection? Just like I've got staph and strep all over my skin, we all do, but that doesn't mean we all have staph infections, right? Or we all, you know, women all have yeast, but that doesn't mean they have a yeast infection. At some point, there's enough of an overgrowth that it becomes considered infectious or something beyond the level of normal. And so similarly with COVID, it is very possible that you have a few particles, but not enough to be considered positive. And what's considered positive is more complex than just simply, the swab was positive. Yes, but what defines a swab as being positive, in particular a PCR swab, is how many cycles does it take before the PCR replication shows that there are coronavirus genetics in your body. So if you just let the primer run through looking for this DNA and you do one cycle, you might not find anything, even if you are COVID positive. And whereas if you do like thousands of cycles on somebody who's effectively never had COVID, you probably will find some sort of a coronavirus element, right? And so what defines positive is, you know, usually people say somewhere around 35 cycles, but we've determined based on laboratory settings, what should be considered truly COVID positive. So just because you might be COVID negative, like you said, does that mean you don't have any particles? No. Could you be vaccinated and still have particles? Of course. We all have particles of all sorts of diseases. Are we likely to spread them? There are pretty good data that are suggesting that at least for COVID, if you're vaccinated, fully vaccinated, the amount of spread is probably fairly low. Would I want to take that chance with my elderly loved one if she or he weren't vaccinated? No. But in general, is it probably safe? Yeah, I think based on the data in general, it probably is safe. Now remember, I think people forget COVID isn't the only disease out there in the world. So there are lots of advantages to wearing masks. And in particular, if you're sick, this whole American heroism of showing up to work sick is not heroic at all, to spread the disease, whatever it is, even if it's a common cold, to your whole office. Not heroic. Stay home. Some people can't. Some people's bosses make them go. Wear a mask. Try not to shake people's hands. Don't hug them. Fairly simple things that the Thai people know, right? The Vietnamese know is, you know, if you're sick, don't go around, you know, grinding everybody at the club. But and so, you know, even if the vaccine is effective at not even, you know, reducing the level of spread, that doesn't mean that you should be saying, you know what, I'm just going to go around doing whatever, especially if you have even the slightest of symptoms, because whether it's COVID or not, honestly, I think it's rude to spread germs. Maybe that's just me, but I think it's rude to spread germs. And this whole idea of it builds immunity, listen, man, nobody ever says that about like being stabbed by a knife, right? Just keep getting stabbed and you'll become immune to it. You know, you can build immunity to certain diseases, especially when you're younger. You know, this idea of being hypoallergenic and extremely so is not a good idea. You want to let babies kind of run around at least a little bit, you know, hang out a little bit. But you're not going to exactly say, well, you know, builds immunity and feed them like your fecal matter, right? I don't drop a deuce and then feed it to babies. So there's a level of, you know, building immunity that's reasonable. And if you're like 45, you're probably not going to build immunity to the common cold. That's why you keep getting it all the time. And so I think in general, it's rude to spread germs. And so vaccinated or not, and COVID or not, the best thing to do is to, you know, just good hygiene in general and proper decorum to people. But as to the specifics of spread with COVID if you're vaccinated, they do seem to be low. And so to now say, yes, you should still distance and wear masks. Yeah, it'll be helpful. If you still distance and wear masks, you're even more likely to be keeping other people safe. But at some level, you're becoming extreme. And I say that as an extremist myself, right? I love being extreme. Like I said, I was wearing masks before the pandemic. I have like 6 bottles of sanitizer on me at all times. People think I'm a nutcase. So we've accepted a certain level of risk in society. And while I think that level of risk has been too high, I think when it comes to being vaccinated, the risk of spread of COVID is indeed low enough that even extremists like myself probably wouldn't be too worried.
Here's a follow-up question, real quickly. There's many nowadays that they all want to take first responder courses, right? CPR, AED, life saving. We all, as an instructor, I always tell my students, you try to get a one-way mask because you don't know, what you're gonna come in contact with. How safe is it? I mean, it's kind of an open question, but if you got somebody that's down, just sudden cardiac arrest, and you start going and start working on them, I would assume you as a first responder, you should be vaccinated, and if you're not, you should really stay away. Correct? Would that be a safe assumption?
I think if you're a first responder and you aren't vaccinated, I'd wonder why. Because clearly you're around a lot of people who can not just make you sick, but make other, you can spread it to others. And so the first question will be why. And there's only so much of a discussion I can have with somebody who thinks like, I don't know, Bill Gates is putting a chip in you. Like that person isn't going to listen to me no matter what I say, right? But if it's somebody who's like on the fence and wondering, hey, listen, I'm young and healthy anyway, especially for somebody who's a first responder, I'd say, yes, you might be young and healthy, but not only could you get it, but you could spread it. That would be the argument I would give. If you're somebody who like wants to learn CPR, if you're somebody who wants to help people and be a first responder that way, in theory, you should be understanding of the fact that if you're trying to help patients, one of the ways of helping them is by not spreading what disease you might have. Hopefully that should click with somebody who wants to be a first responder. I mean, otherwise, why is he a first responder, right? Presumably it's to help people. If they really are saying, listen, I'm going to mask up a ton, wear N95s, wear a shield, because for whatever reason, I want to be vaccinated. Okay. I mean, if you're wearing a good sealed N95 and wearing a shield, then you probably are at significantly lower risk of contracting and spreading it. And we know, like, right, from other countries who didn't have the vaccine, as I've said multiple times, Taiwan didn't have a magical vaccine. You can't beat the disease without having the vaccine. And they didn't all have hazmat suits on. It was just basic, simple stuff like distancing and wearing masks. Obviously, first responders at a little bit more higher risk. I would recommend that they wear a sealed mask, like an N95. And I think face shields can help because of the spray of particles, especially in CPR. It's just that, it's hard to be perfectly vigilant. It's hard for people to not take off a mask and take a sip of water. Like, there's no way of sipping water if you've got an N95 on, right? And you're not doing that during the arrest, but it's amazing how many people don't realize, just don't think about the fact that they took off the mask for a second to wipe off sweat or whatever the case may be. And that's an opportunity. And that's why the vaccination is, in theory, a great, full, safety. You think of it as a backup, but if you don't want to be vaccinated, I mean, this issue came up with HIV too, right? HIV and to a certain extent birth control, but like you can practice safe sex and wear condoms, etc. But really, we didn't dramatically decrease HIV and AIDS simply with that. A lot of it had to do with antiretrovirals because we know human nature. Not everybody wears condoms all the time and practice safe sex all the time. So if you just left it at that, you'd have a certain level of protection. Maybe certain countries, again, would do well with it. But really what really brought down that caseload, especially the mortality of AIDS, was antiretrovirals. And so not the best analogy in this case, but yes, if you're going to be perfect about masking, perfect about sealing, you're probably okay. Clearly, we as a country haven't been perfect. And as I mentioned on another show, somebody asked me, I think it was Kate Burnett. Anyway, I think it was CNN who asked me, hey, of these 500,000 lives, how many could we have saved if this is that. And I said, if we'd been like Taiwan, which again, didn't have a vaccine, if we'd been like Taiwan, of the 500,000, we would have saved 499,900 of them, which seems incredible. But of the 500,000, we would have saved 499,900 of them. And so there are ways of beating it without the vaccine. Just clearly we weren't able to pull that off, not even remotely so. And so that's why we have the vaccine. And that's why we basically recommend people get it, especially people who are on the front lines.
Hey, Doc, we only have a little bit of time left. And again, we appreciate you spending some time with us. Just a couple of questions that came up on the thread. for people that may have had COVID and maybe mild or not, obviously not major, and they didn't take the vaccine, are they able to catch COVID again and possibly spread the virus to others?
Well, that's one of the things I feel like I've become an expert at in Miami, because there's so many people who've gotten COVID 3 times, 4 times, they just walk around like it's nothing. And so when I got here, I was like quite surprised that people were just okay with getting it multiple times. So we know that people have gotten COVID multiple times. It was like debatable before. And there is some debate about how much of that is reactivation versus how much of that is reinfection. And that's fair. But whether it's reinfection or reactivation, clearly spread could happen if it's amplified enough to be positive in the body. Now, again, those guidelines that came out by the CDC and have since been sort of corroborated, which is, after that first week of infection or 10 days, you're probably not very likely to transmit, is probably fairly true. And definitely 2 weeks for most people, 2 weeks after that positive test, probably not very likely to transmit. But everybody's different. Some people hold on to that disease longer than others. And if people are positive enough that they're testing positive, whether that's the same infection, a reinfection, or a new infection, same infection, reactivation, or new infection, if they're positive enough that the PCR dings as positive, and we discussed what positive means just a little while ago in terms of cycles, if they're that positive, they can still spread it. And so, and vaccinated people might be able to spread it too, again, 6 months down the line or a year down the line. I don't know. Right now, the data look good for even 6 months. But we don't know what's going to happen a year after vaccination, right? I'm not saying that I can't also spread it a year from now, because who knows how long the vaccine lasts. But definitely people who have been infected before have been infected again. And again, my statement would be that if you're positive enough to ring off as positive on the PCR, you should treat yourself as still being an infectious agent to others.
So obviously, people that have had COVID, I mean, we've heard the stories of how the vaccination has actually helped COVID long haulers get some of their symptoms relieved. So I guess the bottom line and the story of the day, the takeaway is to get your vaccination if you're able to. And then the other question is a lot of traveling, man. Every day we're breaking records here in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Yesterday, 30,000 more landed. We have 800,000 came into Hawaii this month already. Traveling on the airplane. I know CDC's, the problem with CDC's recent recommendation made a lot of people let their guard down. I think they starting to get the impression, like we have a lieutenant governor here that is telling people once you get your vaccine, you're totally immune. You don't have to worry. That's not what we're hearing from experts, but we got visitors coming over not wearing masks, choosing not to wear their mask because the CDC or the president said we don't have to. Hawaii didn't drop the mask mandate, it's still in place. But coming on an airplane, shouldn't masks and safety precautions be continued during this time?
Yeah, I remember when I said that the CDC said, I consider, the airplane to still be public transportation. And so the FAA, the Federal Aviation Authority, had a mask mandate put in place by President Biden. And so, if people are landing in Hawaii and on the beach and completely by themselves and not wearing masks, that seems totally reasonable. But on a plane, unless something just came out that I don't know about, people are supposed to be masking when they're on forms of transportation. Now, planes do have very good ventilation, better than, for example, even like a school bus or whatever, or a public city bus. But that doesn't mean masks should be coming off. I actually get a little bit peeved when people take them off even to eat their peanuts. You don't need to eat a peanut, okay? It's not an international trip. Now, granted, Hawaii is far. If you're going from the East Coast, you probably do need a little bit of a break. But if you're flying from San Fran or LA to Hawaii, you can hold off, all right? Ramadan just ended. A lot of us were fasting for many more hours than your plane flight is. You can hold off. So if you want to take it off for a brief second while it's ventilated, take a few sips, go for it. But the rest of the flight, you need to be wearing a mask. And again, maybe I'm a little bit biased because I was wearing masks well before the pandemic, but you put me on a fuselage jam-packed with a bunch of people who have God knows what, forget COVID, whatever else they have. I'm not trying to get that. And so I was masking even before, turning my ventilation on full blast. So much so that people around me would get cold, but too bad. That's why I wear a jacket. You can wear one too. And then, if I want to take a sip of water, I would, but then immediately the mask would go back on. Now during the pandemic, it's become an FAA mandate. And so if people are flying to Hawaii, yes, you need to wear a mask on the plane. Unfortunately, we know of all these unruly passengers. And again, unfortunately, you're going to be getting a significant share of them. But I really hope they do their part to at least, I'm hoping that they'll do their part, even if they're not vaccinated, to at least not go around others.
One real quick question. You said that there's going to be a period of time, we don't know yet, the data, as far as the data showing us when the effectiveness runs out on this vaccine, right? Because this virus has been so deadly. Are we going to be taking boosters when it becomes pretty clear that people are dropping like flies again? Because we won't know when that time will come, right? And I think that's the fear, that we don't know how long this vaccine will last in us and how much it's developed in us to protect us. Especially for one who's not medically inclined, but just knowing how devastating this virus has been, is when should the people start really getting watching their P's and Q's when something starts to happen? When would that proper time come?
Yeah, that's a very important question. And God, I hope that, that people don't start dropping off like flies again. If, like I said, we're not at herd immunity, but that doesn't mean the virus can't eventually peter out. So if enough people are vaccinated and you don't get horribly transmissible variants and mutants, then it's possible that even in the few people, not few, there's actually a lot of people, but in that minority, whatever you want to call it, that isn't vaccinated enough or hasn't been vaccinated, that the rate of reproduction and the rate of transmission are low enough that eventually the virus, as it's trying to spread, just doesn't have enough agents to go to. So you've got all these vaccinated people who are somewhat immune, and then the already infected people who are, at least for the short period, immune. We may have a small enough population of people that maybe we're not at herd immunity, but the virus just doesn't have enough room to expand and spread, and it could peter out, that it does kind of die out. If it ends up being that we have a very transmittable strain that's so transmitting so rapidly that's going through all the unvaccinated people at hugely horrible numbers, then yes, you'd get a spike in deaths. But I'm hoping that that's not the case. I'm hoping that between the people who are vaccinated and the people who've already gotten sick, that while we haven't reached herd immunity, the number of cases, while they can go up and down, especially in certain communities, you might have a hot spot breakout in like middle of nowhere, Kentucky, which I drove through recently, scary place. I wouldn't want to live there. If there's a spread there, yikes. But then again, none of us are trying to go to middle of nowhere, Kentucky, right? So no offense to Kentuckians, I guess. But if there's an outbreak there, they're probably not going to spread it to you and me. And so some of the places that have the least level of vaccination may also have the least level of exposure. Yeah, if you're in the middle of nowhere, Idaho, or wherever it may be, you can have spikes, especially if people aren't vaccinated, but hopefully those peter out. And that's what it ends up being. It's kind of like, playing with, when you guys put different kinds of sand on the beach in Hawaii, or playing with marbles when you kind of juggle them around and seeing what filters to the top and what goes to the bottom. Eventually the virus tries to go in different places, but has only so much to go, because people either aren't exposing themselves to others because they live in the middle of nowhere, or everybody around them is either vaccinated or has already gotten sick. And so I'm really hoping that we don't have a spike in deaths. And I think that is a very reasonable chance. I think that spike that was going to happen is, already either happened or is, having little bits and pieces here and there. But I'm hoping we don't get that massive amount of deaths, at least from COVID. But rest assured, Mel and Charlie, there will be more pandemics. And so we really need to learn the lessons from this one, which is that there are ways of beating it and preventing them. And that's the most important thing, that even if we get past COVID, we're not past viruses. They will outlive us. Not that I'm God, but all the science tells us that viruses will outlive us. And so there will be another pandemic, unfortunately. But in terms of COVID, we may have seen the worst of it already, at least in this country. That's the hope.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Doc, it's 8:04 here in Hawaii. It's 2:04 in Miami. I want to just thank you for coming on again tonight. A lot of viewers, a lot of positive comments. I did want to give you an opportunity to share whatever you want. This isn't CNN or MSNBC or any other major networks that you go on all the time. But what's your message to our viewers as it relates to COVID, the vaccine, or whatever? The time is yours. Say what you want. I really appreciate you coming on.
Hey, thank you guys for having me. I know there were a couple of times where you guys reached out and I was either too busy or missed the email. And this time around, I think I tried reaching out myself and saying, hey, I'd love to talk to you guys. And so again, sorry for missing the previous messages. I think a lot of the most important stuff we covered. I really do think we're on the better side of it now. And remember, I'm the guy who was, sometimes called being too negative and antsy. So for me to say, I think we're on the good side of it, I think probably it has hopefully some value. I think, especially if you're vaccinated and hanging around with vaccinated people, I think you're pretty much, you can let your guard down a little bit. But getting back to the last thing I said, pandemics aren't over. There are other bad things that still happen out there, right? So you should still buckle your seatbelt when you drive a car. Yes, I'm not going to force you to, but it's a smart thing to do and an easy way to save lives. Don't drive drunk. If you're sick, stay away from people. If you have to be around them, wear a mask, because this isn't the last pandemic. And on a very politically charged note that might get me some hate, and I will admit that I'm hypocritical about this myself, very much so, but pandemics do start from somewhere. And when you have mass production of small animals who are cooped up, we've talked about mutating strains, we've talked about the evolution of viruses in humans. You take a bunch of chickens, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of them, and put them next to each other so that people can go around eating their chicken, you're going to get more pandemics. And so either you change the industry or you do your part to maybe not participate. And I'll admit, I still eat chicken every once in a while. And one of the reasons I cut back, there's plenty of reasons to not eat as much meat, health reasons, environmental reasons. And I'm not saying everybody needs to become vegan, though there are merits to that, I suppose. But as much as we talk about, masking and distancing, there's one thing that we don't talk about quite as much, and maybe because it's too politically charged, but I think a couple hundred years when viruses are still here and pandemics are still here, people will look back and be like, wow, you guys used to slaughter animals because you wanted to eat a burger? Weird. I know that sounds crazy to say now. And again, I'm a guy who eats meat. But it is something we have to consider, is that these pandemics don't come out of nowhere. Animals cooped up next to each other that are done to make your burger cheaper is a threat to our health.
Wow.
Sorry, that's not what your viewers want to hear. I know that's not what Hawaiians want to hear. But again, like I said, I eat the meat, so I know I'm guilty of it. But it is something to be cognizant of.
Always appreciate your honesty, man. You're making a lot of us think right now. Honey, throw in a chicken. Throw in a chicken. Hey, Doc, again, we appreciate you. It's always a pleasure. People are already asking you to come back on. Charlie, any closing thoughts, Charlie?
Yes, as always, it's just an honor and pleasure to have Murtaza on with us again. And thank you for that sacrifice you made tonight, especially 2 a.m. I lived in Miami for a little while. I used to always go to Joe's Stone Crabs or Monty's down by the Gables down there.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So I loved it. I was staying over at the Miracle Mile, the Colonnade.
Oh wow, you were in a really hip area. Man, I always knew you were cool, Charlie. I always knew you were cool.
I enjoyed it.
I'm in Kendall. So if you ever want a little slice of Cuba right here in America, that's where you find me.
I love Kendall too. But I do want to say, Doc, you have brought so much enlightenment. The topic itself is never boring, especially when you put a spin the way that you see it. So I'd like to thank you very, very much, and hope for the best. And we've got some new reserves coming out in the coffee fields, and definitely you'll be getting them because you got to try them. To our viewers out there, it's always a pleasure and honor to have someone on who has seen the light, who has seen the controversy, but it's come from a real practical point, especially when you practice medicine. You're up on the front lines and you see things, and then you see what you hear what is said, and sometimes some things just sound so outrageous. You have to say what's on your mind, and I'm glad Dr. Akhtar did that tonight, because we said it's unscripted, it's uninhibited. You just go for it, and I'm glad a lot of you felt the impact of the doc and all the information that he gave. So I like to thank him, and I like to thank all the viewers out there. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Mel?
Well, Doc, thank you. And I know a lot of comments about the scammer that was on. The scammer was booted the moment she posted that rubbish about some nonsense. Anyway, so that, yeah, they were blocked. I wanted to say a real quick condolences go out to Jesse, one of our viewers. You see, Doc, and you're part of this family, this ohana that we've created with this show. And Jesse just told us in the post, lost a brother yesterday to COVID. So it's still here. It's still something that we shouldn't let our guard down. Doc, you were the last time, I think the first time you were on our show, you talked about the incredible amount of death that you saw, that you witnessed. All these people checked in, never checked out of the hospital. COVID was bad, and we got to take care of ourselves. I think vaccinations are the key. I know we got some viewers that not going to take the shot. Charlie and I, and I'm sure Doctor respects your decisions, but for those of you that are on the fence and thinking, well, I hope tonight's show gave you the encouragement to go get vaccinated, or at least talk to your doctor about getting vaccinated, because that's going to be the key in getting through this. I agree that with many of the experts that don't believe we'll reach herd immunity. I don't. Just the numbers won't work. But if we get enough people vaccinated, then we can keep the incidence and the hospitalizations and death down. So, Doc, you always, from calling out people, calling them wackadoodles on national TV, to coming to the Mel and Charlie show and dropping a couple of F-bombs, we appreciate you, man. We love you. You're part of our family, and we hope we can get you back on. So this guy is sought after all the major networks, guys, and we got him here tonight, and we're going to let him go because it's 2:12 a.m. over there in Miami. So with that, Doc, take care. Give your family a big hug from all of us here in Hawaii, and let us know when you're coming to Hawaii, to Kauai. Charlie's doing a concert right after when everything's opened up, and Charlie's still hosting that concert completely free, and you'll be the keynote speaker, my friend.
Oh, that's so nice of you. I can't wait. Thank you for having me. I love you guys too. My condolences, Jesse. I think it's aloha mene mene is how you give condolences. But regardless, I'm sorry about the loss. And for any of you who have had losses, I know we've spoken to Charlie before too. Condolences to anyone. We really are all one community. Again, every human life is precious. So thank you guys for having me and for spreading the message. I'm looking forward. We're getting closer to that day. We didn't know last couple of times we said see you out here in Hawaii. We didn't know when that would be, but I think we're getting closer to that day. It really looks that way, and I look forward to being able to celebrate with you guys.
All right.
All right. To our viewers, thank you again. We'll see you guys on Friday night. We got a special show for. We got a crisis, another crisis here. We talked about it on Monday night. Another crisis here about foster parenting. We really desperately need some temporary foster parents, caregivers. We got a crisis here on Kauai and throughout the state. So please join us on Friday night. We got a couple of representatives on to explain what's going on and how you can help. With that, you guys take care, stay safe, God bless. We love you guys. And I love the way you did the shaka when you first came on, Doc. Awesome. Take care, stay safe. Aloha.